They handed her bid back folded, with the wax still whole on it, in front of 60 people. Nobody opened it. The chairman of the hall committee held it out across the table with 2 fingers. He held it the way a man holds a thing he has been asked to carry and would rather not. She took it. Then he wiped that hand down the front of his coat. He did not know he had done it. That was the part that got in. She did not cry. She did not ask him why. If you have ever handed in good work and watched a room agree not to look at it, sit still with me a while. This one is for you. Hit subscribe if you want the rest of it. And drop a comment and tell me what city you are watching from, because I would like to know how far this one travels tonight. Now let's go back to Ballard, Montana territory. The spring of 1888. She sat back down. That is a small thing, and she knew it was a small thing, and she was proud of it anyway for the rest of her life. She sat down in the 3rd row of the Ballard schoolhouse with the folded paper in her apron pocket, and she stayed until the meeting was over. There were 4 more items after hers. Fence wire for the cemetery, a stove, a well cover. A man who wanted the road moved 20 rods east of his gate. She sat through every bit of it with her hands folded on her knee. When it broke up, she walked out through the middle of them, and she told 2 women good night and meant it, and she got up on the wagon seat and drove 9 miles home in the dark. The horse knew the road. That was fortunate. For the first 3 miles she was not driving. Her name was Alma Doak. She was 30 that spring. She was a broad, heavy-built woman, tall through the shoulders. She had forearms a blacksmith would have known on sight. Her hands had been split open and healed over so many times that they did not read the way other women's hands read. Her hair was dark and pinned up. By 9 at night it was always coming down. She wore a green wool work dress that had been dyed twice, and over it a cream apron that had not been properly cleaned since her father died. The county had a word for her. It had had it for 14 months. You will hear it soon enough. Let me tell you about the shop first, because the shop is the whole of it. It stood 9 miles south of Ballard, where the road crosses Cottonwood Creek. Her father bought the 3 acres in 1866. There was nothing on that ground then but the crossing and a man selling whiskey out of a tent. Jotham Stannard was a framer. That word has gone soft since. Let me put it back the way it was. A framer did not nail boards together. A framer took standing timber and made a building out of it with joints, the way a cabinet is made, only 40 feet tall and holding 200 tons of hay. He laid the whole frame out flat on the ground first. Every post, every beam, every brace. He cut a mortise into this stick and a tenon onto that one, so that the 2 of them would come together at a corner 30 feet in the air and be tight. Then he numbered every joint. He had a code for it. That way 90 men who had never seen a drawing in their lives could stand it up in a single day. That was the trade. It was 4,000 years old. It was dying while she stood in it, and she knew that too. Jotham Stannard framed barns in that county for 22 years. The first one on the Rosebud in 1867. The Methodist Church at Ballard. The freight barn at the crossing, the horse barn at the Halkett place on the Tongue River, and 60 or 70 others whose names nobody bothered to keep. He was not a large man. He was quick and gray, a little deaf in the left ear from a maul, and he talked to timber the way some men talk to dogs. He had 1 child. She was it. That was the whole shop. In 1879, he painted a new board for the front of the shop. She was 21 that year. She was up the ladder holding the far end of it, while he squinted along the bottom edge and told her to bring it down a hair. It said Stannard A. & Daughter, Framers. He had paid a sign painter in Miles City $6 to letter it, and he had made the man do the second word as large as the first. Ballard laughed for a month. Not cruelly. People get that wrong when they tell it now. They laughed the way you laugh at a man who names his dog after the governor. Jotham was in on it. The joke was that a girl was going to frame Barnes. For about 2 years, that is all it was. Then, she started laying out. Laying out is the part of framing that nobody ever sees. Any man with a strong back can cut a mortise once he has been shown where. Deciding where is a different animal altogether. You are standing at a pile of sticks and a piece of open ground, with a wind that comes out of the northwest 8 months of the year. No chip has been cut yet, and you are already deciding what that building is going to do for the next 60 years. Where the load goes, how the roof pushes the walls out, and what holds them in. Which stick can be short, and which stick can never, under any circumstances, be short. It is arithmetic. It is also a feel. It does not come out of a book. Her father could do it. She could do it. There was not one other living person in that county who could. She was 19 the first time he let her lay out a whole side. She was 23 the first time he let her lay out a whole barn alone. Nobody outside that shop ever knew it, and that is not a complaint about the county, because it is simply how the trade worked. The shop had a name. The name was his. Frames went out under it. If a man asked who had done the layout on a job, Jotham Stannard would tell him the shop had done it. That was the truth. It was also a door he was holding shut on purpose. He knew what would happen to the business if the answer ever got out. He told her so once, flat, standing in the shop in the winter of 1882, and it is the only unkind thing he ever said to her. "They will not pay for it if they know," he said. "I know that," she said. "That is not me. That is them. I know that too," she said. "Hand me the square." He died in the January of 1886. It was a Thursday. He went out to the woodpile. He never came back in. She found him with the axe still in his hand and the wood not split. The doctor said his heart. She never asked another question about it as long as she lived. By then she had been married 4 years. Wesley Doak came to the shop in 1881 looking for winter work and stayed 6 years. He was a big, warm, slow-moving man out of Missouri, with a laugh you could hear across a section, and he was, without any argument from anybody, the best raiser in eastern Montana. Understand the difference. The county never did. Wesley could take 90 strange men on a Saturday morning and a frame lying flat in the grass, and have it standing and pegged and plumbed by dark with not one man hurt. He could read a crowd. He could pick out the 4 men who were going to panic on a pike pole and put them somewhere they could not do any harm. He knew them by the neck. And he could hold a bent 3 inches out of plumb with his own shoulder while a hand hunted for the peg. There was not a better man in the territory at that. He could not lay out, and he knew it, and he said so out loud at his own table about once a month cheerfully, with his mouth full. "I put them up," he would say. She tells me where. They married in the spring of 1882, when she was 24, and it was not a story of any kind. He came in one evening with his hat in his hands and asked her. She looked at him a while. She said yes. A preacher had to be sent for from Miles City. She loved him. She said that plainly, later, to exactly one person, and we will get to that. For 5 years the shop ran like this. She laid out. He raised. Jotham cut and grumbled and got older. The 3 of them put up 11 barns, 2 churches, a mercantile, a livery, and a bridge deck. By 1885, Stannard and Daughter was the frame shop for 3 counties. Nobody laughed at the board anymore. It was only the name of the place, the way names go. Then Jotham died in the January of 1886. Then Wesley died in the February of 1887. It was lung fever. It took him in 11 days. He was 38 years old and had never been sick a day in his life. The doctor came out twice from Ballard, and the second time he did not take his coat off. She sat up with him the last 3 nights. Near the end he was mostly not there, but there was one clear hour on the Sunday, and he spent it talking about work, because that was the only language the two of them had ever needed. "The Halkett plates," he said. "Best sticks you ever laid out." "Rest," she said. "You laid that whole barn out by yourself," he said. "Wesley, I never told anybody that," he said. "I ought to have told somebody that." He died on the 14th of February, 1887, at about 4 in the morning. They buried him on the hill above the crossing on the 17th. 200 people came. That is a great many people for that country. They liked him. Everybody liked him. Men she had never laid eyes on stood in the snow with their hats off and cried for Wesley Doak. Afterward they came down to the house. Then they ate. Every one of them said the same sentence to her, in some arrangement or other. "I don't know what this county will do without him." They meant it kindly. Hold on to that. All the way through this, hold on to that. Almost nobody in this story is trying to be cruel. They are only certain. And certainty does not have to be cruel to take a woman's living away from her. Here is what the county believed, and had believed for 6 years without ever once saying it out loud. The county believed that Wesley Doak was the builder. He was the one up on the ridgepole. He was the one shouting. He was the big Missouri man with the laugh, standing on a plate 30 feet in the air with a mallet in his fist. She was down in the grass. She had a chalk line and a book. Men rode past her raising. They looked at it. That is what they saw. What you see is what you know. So when he went into the ground on the 17th of February, the trade went in after him. Not one person decided that. It simply became true, the way weather becomes true. She had 2 jobs on the books that spring. A hay barn for a man named Coyle on Sunday Creek, contracted the October before, sticks already cut and stacked in her yard, and a shop building at the crossing. Coyle came out on the 3rd of March. He stood in the yard with his hat on and looked at the stack of cut timber, 90 pieces of it with every joint finished. He said he was awful sorry. He said he had been thinking. He said that with Wesley gone he believed he would go a different way. "The sticks are cut," she said. "I know it. They are cut to your ground, Mr. Coyle," she said. "They will not fit another barn. I laid them out for the slope you have." "I know it," he said again. He looked at his hands. Then he got on his horse. He paid her $40 for the cutting. He did not have to. By the standards of that county in that year, he was a decent man about the whole business. Then he rode to Ballard and hired Ward Ballard to put him up a hay barn out of new stock. It went up in 9 days. It is not standing now. The other job wrote her a letter. That was the March. In the April she went into town for lumber, and that is where the word came from. And I want to be careful about how I tell you this, because everybody tells it wrong. Merritt Ballard was 58 years old. He owned the yard, and the yard was the town, and the town carried his name because he had put the first store on that ground in 1871. He held paper on about 1/3 of the county and had never once foreclosed on anybody, which is a thing people forget when they are busy hating him. He was a good man in most of the ways a county measures a man. He was also certain, all the way down to the floor of him, that a woman could not frame a building, and he no more considered this an opinion than he considered the river an opinion. She came in for joist stock on the 4th of March, 1887, 3 weeks after the funeral, and she gave her order across the counter. Merritt Ballard read it. He set it down. Then he said it, in front of 9 men. "I'll sell you the sticks, Mrs. Doak," he said. "I'd be a fool not to. But I want you to hear it from me, and not from somebody meaner." She waited. Anything that goes out of that shop now is a woman's frame. That is all it is. That is all it can be. And you cannot ask a man to put his hay under a woman's frame. He was not shouting. He was leaning on his own counter with his glasses pushed up on his forehead, and he said it the way a doctor says a thing he has had to say before. 2 of the 9 men looked at the floor. The other 7 did not. One of them, a teamster whose name is not worth carrying this far, laughed once through his nose. She paid for the joists. She loaded them herself. It took her an hour. Nobody moved to help. A woman's frame. By that summer it was in the county's mouth, and it had 2 meanings, and it did both jobs at once, which is how a good insult works. It meant a building she had put a hand to. It also meant anything at all that looked right and would not hold. By autumn men were using it for a bad fence, a green load of hay, a promise that did not come through. A woman's frame. It got into that country the way a burr gets into a horse's tail. She did not answer it. There was nothing to answer. You cannot argue a building into standing. It stands or it does not. From the March of 1887 to the April of 1888, she took in $211. All of it repair work, none of it framing. She reset 2 doors. She rehung a mercantile gate. She cut and fitted 40 window sashes for a hotel at Miles City that never paid her the last $18 of it. She made 6 grain bins. And she made coffins. 4 of them, because there was nobody else within 20 miles who could make a box that closed right. There is a particular kind of quiet that comes over a county when the woman they will not let build a barn is good enough to build the last thing they will ever lie in. She sold the team her father broke. She kept the old gray horse. She kept the tools. All of them. She owed $285 on the shop and the 3 acres. Merritt Ballard held the note. He had renewed it twice without being asked, and he would have renewed it again, and she knew it. Somehow that was the worst part of the whole business. It came due on the 1st of September, 1888. That is exactly where she stood, on the night they handed her bid back folded, in front of 60 people, in the schoolhouse at Ballard, on the 10th of April, 1888, and 22 miles east of that schoolhouse. Out on the Rosebud, there was a pile of broken timber 90 feet long lying in the grass with the wind going over it. Every man in that room had driven out to look at it. It was the reason not one of them would open her envelope. Because on the 17th of March, 3 weeks before, the biggest barn in Custer County had fallen down. And every soul in that country knew whose shop had framed it. The cross anchor lay 22 miles east of Ballard on the Rosebud, and it was the biggest outfit in that end of the county. Emmett Locke owned it. He was 35 years old. He had come up the trail from Texas in 1874. He was a hand of 21, 1 horse and a borrowed saddle. He worked 7 years for the man who owned that ground. In 1881, he bought him out on paper. He took 6 years to clear. He ran 4,000 head. And about 300 horses. He was lean and weathered and not tall, with a face that had been out in the weather since he was a boy, and a habit of listening to a man all the way to the end before he answered. He wore a broad hat and a leather vest gone the color of the road. He did not drink, and he did not talk much, and the county thought well of him. In the guarded way a county thinks well of a man who has more than it does. In the spring of 1887, he needed a barn. Not a shed, a barn. He was putting up 300 tons of hay a year by then. He was wintering horses. He had 3 hands living out in a tent in January, like it was 1876. He had made up his mind. Properly, and once. And here is the part she did not know until much later. And it is the part that stayed with her. He thought about her. He sat at his own table in the March of 1887 with a pencil, 4 weeks after Wesley Doak went in the ground. He wrote Stannard on a piece of paper. He looked at it. Then he wrote Move the Halkett frame under it. He circled the second one. He was not being cruel. He was being ordinary. The Halkett brothers had run horses on the Tongue River, and they had a barn on that place that men rode 30 miles out of their way to look at. Jotham Stannard's shop cut it in 1881. It was 90 feet long and 40 feet wide, 9 bents, with a hay floor you could drive a loaded wagon onto, and a roof that carried snow for 6 winters without a groan. Then came the winter of 1886, and that winter is its own story, and everybody in this country still knows the name of it. The cattle died standing up. It snowed in November. It did not stop. The Chinook came in January and glazed the whole territory in ice 2 inches thick. The stock could not paw through it. By the March of 1887, there were outfits in eastern Montana that had lost 8 head out of every 10. The Halketts lost 9 out of 10. They walked away in the April and sold what would not walk with them. The barn went at auction on the 11th of May, 1887, for $600. Emmett Locke bought it. You could do that then. A frame was a thing you could take apart. That is what a frame is. Every joint numbered, every peg drawboard, every stick cut to sit in one place and no other. You knock the pegs out, you lower it, you haul it, and you stand it back up somewhere else. And if the men doing it know their business, it is exactly the same building 40 miles away. He hired Ward Ballard to move it. Ward Ballard was 33 years old, and he was the coming man in that county. He built fast. He built cheap. He built out of new mill stock with wire nails. He could put a serviceable barn on your ground in 2 weeks for 2/3 of what a framed one cost. Every year there was more of what he did. Every year there was less of what she did. He was not a fraud. He believed what he was selling. He thought joints were 300 years out of date, and he said so pleasantly to anybody who asked. He took the Halkett frame down in the June of 1887. He hauled it 40 miles in 22 wagon loads. He stood it up again on the Rosebud in 6 weeks with a crew of 11 men. Emmett Locke paid $1,450 for the whole business, frame and hauling and raising. He shook his hand in his own yard. He thought he had done well. He had done well. On paper, he had done extremely well. The barn stood for 8 months. On the night of the 17th of March, 1888, the wind came up out of the northwest at dark, and it blew all night. That is not remarkable in that country in March. It blew the roof shingles off the Ballard schoolhouse. It laid down a stretch of new fence on Sunday Creek. It kept everybody in the county awake. In the morning, men went out to look at their own places, the way you do. The cross-anchor barn had come down between 2 and 3 in the morning. Nobody heard it. That is 90 feet of building and 9 tons of loose hay, and it went over into the grass on the north side, and the house was 400 yards off, with the wind screaming, and nobody in it heard a thing. There was nothing inside but hay. The 2 horses were in the lean-to on the south, and the lean-to stood, and they were still in it in the morning with their ears back. Emmett Locke came out of his door at first light and stopped on the step. His foreman, a Kentucky man named Cull Rainey, 44 years old, said the only thing anybody said out there that morning. Well, he said. They walked out to it. It was lying almost flat. The bents had gone over one into the next like a hand of cards laid down. All of them north. The roof boards had peeled. The whole thing was a long broken heap in the grass, with hay blowing out of it across half a section. Locke stood there about 20 minutes. He did not say anything at all. Then he said, "Get the horses out of the lean-to." That was the 18th of March. By the 20th, men were driving out to see it. They came for 3 weeks. They came from Ballard and from Miles City and from as far as Sunday Creek and the Tongue, and they stood in the grass with their hands in their pockets, and they walked the length of it, and they said the same 2 things. The first thing was, "That is a shame." The second thing was the one that mattered. That is the Halkett barn. Everybody in that country knew the Halkett barn. Everybody knew who had cut it. Stannard's shop cut it in 1881. That was 7 years gone. The old man was 2 years dead. and the whole county stood in the grass on the Rosebud in the April of 1888 and looked at 132 broken sticks and drew the only conclusion there was to draw. Ward Ballard drew it out loud, in his father's yard, in front of the yard hands. He was not gloating. That is what makes it stick. I put that frame back up exactly as it come down, he said. Every stick where the numbers said. If a frame will not stand when you build it the way it was cut, then it was cut wrong. That is all there is in it. And Merritt Ballard, behind the counter cleaning his glasses, said, "That is a woman's frame, is what that is." 9 men heard it the first time, in the March of 1887. The whole county heard it the second time. Now understand what that did to her, and understand that it was not a rumor. This is the thing that separates this spring from every spring before it. For 14 months the word had been an opinion. On the 17th of March it became evidence. There was 90 feet of it lying in the grass, where anybody could drive out with a wife and a lunch and see it with their own eyes. You cannot argue with a fallen building. Everybody knows what a fallen building means. She heard about it on the 19th, at the crossing, from a man buying nails. She did not say anything. She finished the sale. She went into the shop and shut the door and sat down on the bench where her father used to sit. And she stayed there until it got dark, and then she got up and went in and ate supper standing at the stove. 3 weeks later, they handed her bid back folded. And 17 days after that, on the 27th of April, 1888, she hitched the old gray horse to the wagon at 4 a.m. and drove 22 miles out to the Rosebud to look at it herself. She had not been asked. She had not written ahead. She left in the dark because she did not want to be seen on the road, which is a thing she was ashamed of afterward, and she got there a little after 9 a.m. She did not go to the house. She left the wagon at the gate. She walked out to the wreck across half a mile of new grass. Then she stood at the north end of it in her green dress and her cream apron with the wind pushing at her. She looked at it a long time. She did not touch anything yet. Then she went in. I want you to see this the way she saw it, because it is not what you would see. You would see a heap. She saw a building. She walked the whole 90 feet of it 3 times. She did not climb on it, because a fallen frame will move under you and kill you, and she had known that since she was 12. She went around the outside. She read the ends. Every timber in a framed building has its number cut into it at the joint, a Roman numeral, chopped in with a race knife. Those numbers are how 90 men put it up in a day. They are also how 11 men take it down in a week. They were all there. 7 years of weather had not touched them. The 3, and then the one she was looking at without knowing yet that she was looking at it. Iree, her father numbered 4 with 4 strokes. Every framer had a habit. That one was his. He had it from the man who trained him in Pennsylvania in 1851. He put it into her hand when she was 14. She had never once in her life cut a 4 any other way. She stood in the wet grass on the Rosebud, looking at a EE cut in the end of a broken tie beam. And behind her a man said, "Ma'am." Cull Rainey had ridden up on her while she was reading the ends. He had been sitting his horse 30 feet back for a good 2 minutes. "Mr. Rainey," she said. "You'll have to get off this," he said. "I am not on it," she said. "I am beside it. You know what I mean." She straightened up. There were 3 more riders coming across from the corrals now. A wagon at the gate is news on a place like that. 2 of them were young. One of them was Fen Shivers, who was 22, and who had carried joists for her husband at 2 raisings, and who did not know where to look. "Mr. Rainey," she said, "there are 32 mortises in this wreck that I would like to put my hand into. No, ma'am, it will take me an hour." "Mrs. Doak." He got down off the horse, which she gave him credit for, because it is easier to say a thing like that from up there. You know what this is. Every man in this county has been out here. and you standing in the middle of it in front of my hands is not going to do you one bit of good, and it is not going to do him any good either, and I would rather not have to say it twice." "You have not said it once yet," she said. "You have been talking around it. Get off the place." "There it is," she said. She said it evenly. That is what got him. She said it the way you thank a man for the correct time. She picked up her skirt out of the wet. She walked back toward the gate with 4 men on horses behind her, and not one of them saying anything. It was half a mile. It took her a long while. She did not hurry a step of it. Emmett Locke was standing at the gate by her wagon. He had come down from the house on foot. He had his hat in his hand, which nobody who saw it ever forgot, because Emmett Locke did not take his hat off outdoors for anybody. "Mrs. Doak," he said. "Mr. Locke." "Cull," he said, without turning around. "Go on." Rainey went. The other 3 went with him. She waited until they were 100 yards off. "I came without asking," she said. "That was wrong, and I will not pretend otherwise. I would like an hour on that wreck. I will pay you for the hour if you want to name a figure." "Why?" "Because I do not think that frame fell," she said. He looked at her. "It is lying in the grass," he said. "It is lying in the grass," she agreed. "But it did not fall the way a frame falls. A frame that is cut wrong comes apart at the joints. It splits the tenons out and it breaks the pegs off, and it leaves you a pile of firewood. That is not what is out there. What is out there is 9 bents that went over whole, together, all one way, like a gate swinging. Every one of those joints is still tight. Mr. Locke, your barn did not break. Your barn leaned over." He did not answer that for a while. "Say the rest of it," he said. "I would rather have my hour first. Say the rest of it now." "A frame does not stand up because the joints are tight," she said. "The joints only hold the sticks in the same room together. What keeps a barn from leaning over in a wind is the bracing. It is 4 sticks in every bent, set at an angle, and they are the whole of it, and they are the only thing in that building doing that job. And I would like to go out there and put my hand into the brace mortises. And what do you expect to find in them?" he said. "Nothing," she said. "That is the trouble. I expect to find nothing at all." He gave her the hour. He did not say yes. He put his hat back on and started walking, and she came after him, and that was the yes. They went out through the wet grass without talking. Cull Rainey watched them go from the corral fence. He did not follow. That was deliberate. He told a man in Ballard about it a year later and said he had wanted to follow, and that he was glad afterward that he had not, because he would have had to stand there and hear it. She stopped at the 3rd bent from the north end. "This one," she said. "Why this one?" "Because it is lying on its face and I can reach the underside." She got down on her knees in the grass in her good dress. "Give me your knife." He gave her his knife. The post was 8 inches by 8. It lay half buried. She scraped the sod away from the joint with the back of the blade. She worked at it maybe 4 minutes. Then she sat back on her heels. "Look," she said. He got down beside her. There was a hole cut into the face of that post. It was a slot, 6 inches long and 1.5 inches wide, cut on the slant, with the tool marks still bright inside it after 7 years, because no weather had ever got at them. It was empty. "That is a brace mortise," she said. "There is supposed to be a stick of oak in there 5 feet long, running up to the tie beam at 45 degrees, and there is another one going the other way, and they are what stop this building from leaning over in a wind. There is nothing in it." "No, it broke out." "It did not break out," she said. "Mr. Locke, put your finger in there." He put his finger in there. "Now feel the bottom of it," she said. "Go all the way in." He did. "What do you feel?" "Nothing, that is the point," she said. "That is chisel. That is the mark of the corner of a 1.5-inch chisel, and it is as sharp as the day it was cut. If a brace had ever been in that hole, it would have been in there under load for 7 years. There would be a bruise. oak crushes fir. There would be a shine on the bottom and a rock line where it worked. There is nothing in there but chisel marks and 3 spiders. He took his finger out. He looked at it. "Show me another one," he said. She showed him another one. Then another. They went down the wreck, bent by bent, for the better part of 2 hours, and the hour she had asked for was never mentioned again by either of them. Not all of them were reachable. Some were under the pile and some were under the roof boards, and 2 were in the creek. But she got to 11 of them that morning, in 5 different bents, and 11 out of 11 were clean. At the 9th one, he stopped asking questions. At the 11th, he sat down on a broken purlin with his forearms on his knees and looked out across the grass at nothing for a while. "How many should there be?" he said. "In a barn this size?" 32. 32. 4 in every bent, and 9 bents, but the 2 end bents take a different pattern, so 32. She wiped the knife on her apron and handed it back to him, handle first. "There should be 32 sticks of oak in that pile, Mr. Locke, 5 feet long, tenon on each end. They are not in the mortises, and I have walked the whole wreck twice, and they are not lying loose in it either." "Where are they?" "I do not know." He turned the knife over in his hands. "Mrs. Doak," he said, "you understand what you are telling me." "Yes, you are telling me," he said, "that the man I paid $850 stood up 9 bents with no bracing in them." "I am telling you what is in front of us," she said. "I am not telling you why. That is a fine line. It is the only line I have got," she said. And then he said the thing. He did not say it to hurt her. He said it because it was true, and because he was a man who had been sold a barn once already that year, and did not intend to be sold another one. "You would say this," he said. She did not answer. "Do you see it? Whatever is out here, you are the one person in this county who cannot be the one to find it. If I ride into Ballard tomorrow and say the widow went over my wreck on her hands and knees and come up with a reason it was not her father's frame after all, what do you suppose that sounds like?" "It sounds like a woman with an excuse," she said. "It sounds like a woman with an excuse," he agreed. "I know exactly what it sounds like." She got up off her knees and she straightened her apron, and she was 2 hours wet through and there was mud to her elbows. I have known that since the 19th of March. I did not drive 22 miles out here at 4 in the morning to be believed, Mr. Locke. I came to find out. Those are 2 different errands, and only one of them is any of your business. He stood up. "Then what do you want?" he said. "I want the job." "You want the job," he said. "I want the job." "Say what the job is." "Your frame is out there," she said. "Most of it. The wind broke sticks, it did not eat them. I have walked it twice, and I will tell you now, without going back over it, that you have got 9 sills and 26 posts and 11 tie beams, and better than 60 rafters lying in that grass that are as sound today as the day they were cut. That is a barn. It is lying down, and it is 7 years old, and it is a barn. Cull says it is firewood. Cull is a cowman. Cull is a good cowman. Then let him mind the cattle, she said, and let me tell you about timber. That is how she talked to him. From the first morning, she never once softened it, and she never once got up on her back legs about it either. And years later, when a man asked him what it had been about her, that is the thing he said. She talked to him like a man selling him something he needed. "Give me your figure," he said. $625. "For what?" "For a barn standing on this ground before the snow, framed, raised, roofed, and pegged. 7 bents instead of 9, because you have lost too much length, and I will not fake it. That is 70 feet instead of 90. You will have less hay floor and a stouter building, and I will show you the arithmetic on paper if you want it. I want it. You will have it Thursday." He looked out at the wreck. "How long?" I raise it the first week of September, she said. I want to be roofed by the 20th. 4 months. 4 months. Ward Ballard would have new stock on this ground in 5 weeks, he said. Yes, he would, she said. And you have already bought one of those. That is the only cruel thing she said to him that day. It went in. She saw it go in, and she was not sorry, and she has said since that she should have been. He asked her about the crew. That is my second term, she said. I do not want a crew. You cannot raise a barn alone. I cannot raise it alone. I can cut it alone. She pointed with her chin down the length of the wreck. There is 4 months of work out there for one person, and 6 weeks of it for 12. And 12 men on that ground is 12 men who would have to be told every single thing twice, and I would spend my whole summer talking. I want it quiet. I want to take it apart myself, and I want to lay it out myself, and I want to cut every joint in it with my own hands. On the day of the raising, you will get me all the men in the county. Not before. You want to work alone. Out here. Yes, for 4 months. Yes, why? She did not answer that one right away. Because when it stands, she said, there will not be one man in Montana who can say he helped. He looked at her a while. All right, he said. Then he did the other thing, and this is the first of them. And I want you to count them with me as we go, because there are 4 of them in this story, and every one of them matters. Mrs. Doak, he said. Merritt Ballard holds paper on your shop. He does. $285 is what I hear, he said. You hear correctly. I will take that up, he said. Today, it is nothing to me, and it would take a stone off you, and you can pay it back out of the contract or not, as it suits. She stood in the mud in her ruined dress, with 2 hours of the man's wreck under her fingernails, and she said no. Why? He said. Because on the day that barn stands, somebody is going to say he bought it, she said. And I have spent 14 months being a thing that a man did. I am not going to spend the next 40 years being a thing another man paid for. Nobody would know. I would know, she said. That is the whole trouble with me, Mr. Locke. I have always known. She got up on her wagon. Thursday, she said, with the figures. She drove out the gate and 22 miles home, and she got to the crossing at 8 that night, and she unhitched and fed and rubbed the old horse down, and then she went into the shop and lit a lamp and sat down at the bench and put her face in her hands and stayed like that for a while. Then she got up and started drawing. Now, the county. Word went to Ballard the same way word always went, which is to say a hand rode in for tobacco on Saturday, and by Sunday dinner there was not a house in 30 miles that had not heard it. Emmett Locke had hired the widow, not to cook, not to keep books, to build the barn back. I want to tell you that the county laughed, because that is the shape you are expecting, and it did laugh, some. But mostly it did something worse. The county got embarrassed. They were embarrassed for him. That is the exact phrase men used in the yard that week. Feel sorry for Locke. Losing that barn has knocked something loose in him, and there was a warm, comfortable, terrible pity in it that she could feel from 22 miles away, and it was worse than any laughing, because you cannot get hold of pity. There is nothing to push against. Ward Ballard heard it in his father's office. He is entitled, he said. It is his money. It is my money, Merritt Ballard said. Some of it. That was on the Monday. On the Tuesday, when she came in for Oak, Merritt Ballard would not sell it to her on the book. He was decent about it. He was always decent about it, which is the thing about that man that people cannot hold 2 of at once. Cash, he said. I have had the book here 22 years, she said. You have had the book here on framing work, he said. I do not call this framing work. I call this a man being generous with a widow. And when it comes apart, Mrs. Doak, I will not have $60 of my oak lying out on the Rosebud in the wet. It will not come apart. I hope it does not. And here is where you would expect her to shout, and she did not. She stood at that counter with 4 men behind her pretending to look at harness, and she opened her purse, and she counted $19 out onto the wood and silver, and she said, "Then I will take what $19 buys, and I will be back Thursday with more." He counted it. He gave her a receipt. He wrote it out in his good hand and blotted it and passed it across, and he said, not unkindly, "I would rather you did not do this." "I know you would," she said. "You have been kind to me my whole life, Mr. Ballard, and you have cost me more than any man who ever hated me. I have thought about that a good deal, and I still cannot make it come out even." Then she carried her own oak to the wagon. She got $19 worth of white oak that day, which is not much oak. She would need 3 times that before she was done. But she was not going to Miles City yet, because Miles City was $19 the thousand delivered, and Ballard's was $14. And she was going to buy every stick she could out of that yard at that counter in front of those men for as long as her money held. You will understand why by September. She started on the 3rd of May. Understand what she was walking into. There were 132 timbers in that wreck, and the largest of them was a sill 40 feet long and 12 inches square, and it weighed something over 1,600 pounds. She was one woman with a horse. So the first 9 days she did not touch the wreck at all. She built things to work with. She built a skid road out of poles from the creek. She built 6 trestles at working height, 4 of them heavy enough to hold a sill. She rigged a set of shears out of 3 lodgepole and a block Locke had in the shop, and she borrowed a snatch block and 60 feet of rope, and she brought the old gray horse out from the crossing and staked him on grass. And she set up a canvas fly and a fire ring and a barrel. She slept out there. From the 3rd of May to the 6th of September, she slept in that field, on a wagon sheet under a fly, and drove the 22 miles home only on Saturday nights. She was 30 years old, and she was alone on 40 acres of grass with 132 broken sticks, and she was, by her own account, the happiest she had been since the February of 1887. That is a true sentence, and it is not a comfortable one. She said it herself, later, out loud, to the one person she said things to. She said, "I had my hands on timber again. I did not care that it was the worst summer of my life. I had my hands on timber again." The sorting took her 5 weeks. She started at the north end, and she took the wreck apart 1 stick at a time, and every stick got the same 4 questions. Is it sound? Is it broken? Where is it broken? And what number is on it? She rolled them with a peavey. She dragged them with the horse. When a stick was too big for her and the horse both, she moved it 6 inches at a time with a bar and 2 blocks. And there is a place in the middle of that field where the grass never came back right, because she spent 2 days there moving one 40-foot sill 30 feet. She sorted them into 4 ranks. Sound. Sound if shortened. Sound for something else. Firewood. Rank 1 came out at 84 sticks. Rank 4 came out at 11. 84 sound timbers out of 132. Every man in the county had looked at that pile and seen a wreck, and she had looked at it and seen 84 good sticks, and the difference between those 2 things was not eyesight. It was 5 weeks of work nobody else was willing to do. And every one of those 84 sticks had a number on it. She read every number. She wrote every number down in a book, in a hand that got worse as the summer went on. With a stub of carpenter's pencil she sharpened with a chisel. I, E3, 7, C. The numerals ran on the down face of every timber. That is not usual. Most shops cut the number on the outside face where a man can read it standing up. Her father cut his on the face that would be against the ground when the bent was laid out flat. because he said a number on the outside face is a number that gets weathered off, and a number on the down face is there in 100 years for whoever has to take it apart. Whoever has to take it apart. She had heard him say that in 1874, and she had heard it every year after, and she had never once thought about who it might be. By the first week of June there were people driving out on Sundays. That is the part she never talked about afterward, except once. They would come out from Ballard after church in a buggy, 2 and 3 buggies some weeks, and they would not come through the gate. They would stop on the section road 400 yards off and sit there in the buggy and look at a woman in a field, in a green dress, with the sleeves cut off at the elbow, dragging timber with a horse. Nobody shouted anything. Nobody threw anything. Once a young man called out something across the grass, and the woman with him made him stop. Mostly they just sat and looked for 10 minutes or 20, and then they drove on, and she went on working with her back to the road, because turning around was the one thing she would not do. She did not turn around all summer. Not once. That is not a figure of speech. On the 12th of June, Iva Ballard drove out. She was 55 years old, and she was Merritt Ballard's wife, and she ran the church, the socials, the burying money, and about half of what got decided in that town before it ever got said out loud in a meeting. She had known Alma since Alma was 8. She had taught her to him. She came through the gate. She had a basket on the seat. Alma, Mrs. Ballard. I have brought you some things. That is kind. Will you come and take them out of the buggy? She asked. I have got a tie beam on rollers, she said, and if I walk away from it I will have to do the last hour over. You are welcome to set them on the trestle. Iva Ballard set them on the trestle. Bread, a jar of butter, 2 shirts of Merritt's, washed and mended, cut for a big person, a comb. She stood there while Alma worked. Everybody is worried about you, she said. I am well. You are sleeping in a field. I am. Alma, look at me. She looked at her. They are saying you have gone queer, Iva Ballard said. I want you to hear it from me. They are saying grief has turned you, and that Emmett Locke is being soft with a widow, and 2 women asked me on Sunday whether somebody ought to write to your mother's people in Iowa. And what did you say? I said I would come out and see. Well, Alma said, here it is. Iva Ballard looked around that field a second time. The mowed floor. The chalk line pegged down the middle of it. 84 timbers up on trestles with their ends squared and their numbers chalked, laid out in ranks in order like a regiment. She was not a stupid woman. She had been in that county 30 years. It is very tidy, she said. It is a building, Mrs. Ballard. It is sticks. So was the church, Alma said, in the April of 1873. Iva Ballard did not have anything to say to that. She got back in her buggy, and she took up the lines, and then she stopped. He should not have said it in the yard, she said, in front of men. I have told him so 4 times. But he is right. I did not say that. You did not say anything else, either, Alma said. Thank you for the bread. It was a long drive out. Iva Ballard drove home. She did not come back that summer. But she was in the schoolhouse in November, and she was standing when the paper was read, and we will get to that. On the 17th of June, Fen Shivers came over the fence. He was 22, and he was the youngest hand on the cross anchor, and he had carried joists for Wesley Doak at 2 raisings when he was 17, and he had been riding past that field every day for 6 weeks looking at the ground. Mrs. Doak. Mr. Shivers, that bar is too short for that. It is. He stood there. Cull says I am not to help you. Then do not help me. He never said nothing about watching. So, he watched. For 40 minutes he sat on the fence and watched her move a tie beam. and then he came down off the fence without a word and put his hands on the far end of it, and neither one of them said anything about it then or ever. He came 3 evenings a week after that, on his own time, after his day was done. He is the reason she got the plates turned over in July instead of August, and that is where this stops being a story about a fallen barn. Let me show you a layout floor, because you cannot understand what happened on the 17th of July unless you have stood on one. She mowed a piece of that field flat with a scythe, 60 feet by 30. She leveled it with a shovel and a straight edge and 2 stakes and a water trough, and she pegged a chalk line down the middle of it, and that line was the building. Everything came off that line. A frame is not drawn on paper. Not really. There was a sheet of paper, and she made one for Locke on the Thursday with the arithmetic on it, and he kept it in a tin box for the rest of his life. But the real drawing is full size, and it is on the ground. You lay the actual sticks down where they will go. You put the post here and the tie beam across it there, and you scribe the joint onto both of them at once, with the 2 sticks touching, and then you cut what you scribed. That is why a hand-framed building fits. Not because the framer measured well. Because he did not measure at all. Timber is not square. A hewn stick is fat in the middle. It winds along its length. No 2 of them are alike. A man who lays them out with a rule and a number will build you a barn full of gaps. A woman who lays them down touching and scribes the truth of what is actually there will build you one that comes together at 30 feet in the air with a joint you cannot get a knife blade into. Her father called it the difference between arithmetic and honesty. I want to stop here a minute, because you cannot see what this cost her unless you can see what was actually going out of the world that summer, and it was not a woman's living only. In 1888, there were perhaps 6 men left in the whole territory of Montana who could lay out a frame from standing timber and stand it up without a nail in it. And 4 of them were over 60 years old, and 2 of them had already quit and gone to selling stoves. What replaced them was not worse men. What replaced them was a railroad, a sawmill at Bismarck, a boxcar of wire nails at $3 the keg, and a way of building where you buy 2-inch stock cut to a number by a machine, and you fasten it together with iron, and you sheet the whole thing over. And any 4 men with hammers can do it in a fortnight without ever once being taught anything by anybody. And it works. That is the part nobody wants said out loud. A nailed building works for a while, in ordinary weather, on ordinary ground, and it is cheaper by half and faster by 3 times. And a man with 200 tons of hay coming in 5 weeks before the snow does not want a lecture on joinery from anybody. What a nailed building will not do is stand for 200 years and be taken apart by somebody's granddaughter and put back up 40 miles away. And it will not tell you 7 years afterward, in cut letters on a face nobody has looked at since it left the shop, exactly who made it and exactly what was done to it. A framed building is a written record of every decision anybody ever made about it, and that is a thing worth having. And in the year 1888 in eastern Montana, it was worth almost nothing at all in money. So the woman standing on that layout floor in June was not only fighting a county that had decided she could not build. She was standing at the far end of 4,000 years of a trade, holding a chisel, with the whole century coming the other way, and she knew it perfectly well, and she cut the joints anyway. She rebuilt that barn from 9 bents to 7. She did it on that mowed floor. A chalk line, a story pole, and 2 pieces of window glass floated in a trough of water for a level. 70 feet instead of 90. 28 feet to the plate instead of 30. The shortened frame took the 84 sound sticks and needed 21 new ones, and she cut every one of the 21 out of stock she bought $19 at a time. She was on that floor from the 6th of June. Emmett Locke came down to the field about twice a week that summer, and it took her until the middle of July to work out why. He did not help. He did not ask questions that had answers he could use. He would ride down at 6 in the evening. Then, get off. He stood at the edge of the layout floor with his hat pushed back. He looked at what was on the ground. About a third of the time he said nothing at all for 20 minutes, and then got back on his horse and rode home. "You are checking on me," she said one evening. "No, then what?" He thought about it, which was a habit of his that she came to be glad of. "I paid $1,450 for a barn, and I never once went and looked at it while it was going up," he said. "I have thought about that a good deal since the 17th of March. That is not your fault. It is exactly my fault," he said. "That is what owning a thing is." Another evening he said, "How do you know that stick goes there?" "Because it went there before." "How do you know?" "Because it says so," she said, and she put her boot on the down face of the beam and turned it, and there it was. E.E. Cut in with a race knife in 1881. Every joint in this building was made for one other joint and no other joint. That is a marriage, Mr. Locke. Those two sticks have been apart 8 months, and they will go back together in September like nothing happened. And the ones that broke, they get new partners, she said. And that is the hard part, and that is the part I get paid for. He laughed. It was the first time she had heard it. It was not much of a laugh, and she thought about it on and off for a week. In the second week of July, Merritt Ballard drove out. He came in a top buggy with his wife's lap robe on the seat, and he came in the middle of the afternoon, and he did not stop on the section road like the Sunday people. He came through the gate and down to the layout floor, and he got out and stood there in his town shoes, in the cut grass. He was 58. He had known her since she was 8. "Alma," he said. She had not heard her own name in about 5 weeks. "Mr. Ballard." He looked at the floor. He looked at the 84 timbers ranked up on trestles with their ends squared and their numbers chalked. He looked at the shears and the skid road and the fire ring and the wagon sheet under the fly. He looked at the row of chisels laid out on a board with their edges up. Then he looked at her. Green dress, sleeves cut away, forearms burned brown to the elbow. He was quiet a long time. "I will give you $700 for the shop and the 3 acres, he said. "No, Alma, no. Sir, listen to me." And he was not being sly. That is what you have to understand about this scene, and she understood it at the time, which is why it hurt. I have carried that note 3 years, and I would carry it 3 more. But this is not going to end how you want it to end. And when it does not, you will lose the shop anyway. You will lose it in front of everybody. And there will not be $700 in it for you then. There will be nothing in it for you. Take it now and go to Miles City and set up at sash and door work where there is a living, and let this go. That is a fair price, she said. It is a good deal better than fair, he said. It is, she said. You have never cheated anybody in your life. Mr. Ballard, do me a kindness. Tell me plainly. Do you think I cut that frame wrong? He put his hands in his pockets. I think your father was an old man in 1881, he said. He was 54. I think a shop where the old man is failing and the girl is doing the work is a shop where things get missed, he said. I do not think you did it on purpose. I never said that, and I never will. You said it could not be anything else. I said it was a woman's frame, he said. And I am 58 years old, and I have been in the lumber business 22 years, and I have never in my life seen a woman cut a joint that would hold. And Alma, I have looked. You have looked at 11 barns of mine and called them his, she said. He did not say anything. Get in your buggy, Mr. Ballard, she said. Please, before one of us says the thing. He got in the buggy. At the gate he stopped and turned around and called back across the grass. She has said it was the only cruel thing he ever said to her. She has also said he did not mean it that way. He never knew it landed. I will hold the note to the 1st of September, he called. After that I cannot. That was the second one. Count it. Then came the 17th of July. The plates are the 2 longest sticks in a barn. They run the whole length of the building along the top of the posts, and every rafter sits on them, and they are the sticks that ties 7 bents into one building. In the halkett frame, they were 40 feet long and 10 inches by 12. Each one weighed better than half a ton. They had been lying face down in the grass since the 17th of March, with the wind and 4 months of weather on them. She had left them for last because she could not turn them alone. Fen Shivers came over the fence at 7 in the evening on the 17th of July with a borrowed team. The 2 of them rigged the shears. Then the snatch block. They turned the northeast plate over onto skids in about 40 minutes. It came over slow and heavy, and it settled into the grass with a sound she said she felt in her teeth. And she went down on her knees at the north end of it, where the plate had sat on the corner post for 7 years, because that is where the mark is. Every framer has a mark. It goes on the last joint he fits, on the hidden face, and it is not for the owner, and it is not for the county. It is for whoever takes the building apart in 100 years. Her father cut his on the underside of the northeast plate. Every building he ever framed. It is 2 letters and 4 numbers. Go to the Methodist Church at Ballard today and get under that plate with a lamp, and you will find JS 1873 in it, an inch deep and clean as the day. She scraped the dirt out of the face of that plate with her thumbnail. And she found her own mark. A S 1881, she had cut it herself with her father's race knife, on a Tuesday in the September of 1881. She was 23 years old. She was standing on a bench in the shop, with him behind her saying it was too deep, and her saying it was not deep enough. He had made her do it. She had not wanted to. She had said it was his shop and his name on the board, and he had said the board said 2 things on it, and she had said nobody reads the second one, and he had said, somebody will. In 100 years, somebody will. She knelt in the grass on the Rosebud on the 17th of July, 1888, with her hand flat on those 6 characters, and she understood the whole thing in about 4 seconds. Fen Shivers said, "Ma'am, is it cracked?" "No," she said. "It is not cracked. You have gone white." "Go home, Fen, Mrs. Doak. Go home," she said. "Please, I am obliged to you. Go home." He went home. She sat down in the grass, beside 40 feet of hewn fir, with the light going out of the sky, and she did not move for a long time. Now let me tell you what she was holding. She was holding the only proof in the territory of Montana that a woman had laid out a whole barn by herself. Not helped, not carried the chalk line, laid it out, alone at 23, and cut the mark on it the way a framer does. It stood on the Tongue River for 6 winters and carried the deepest snow anybody in that country remembers on a roof 40 feet wide. She was also holding the only proof in the territory of Montana that the barn that fell down on the Rosebud on the 17th of March was hers. The same 6 characters. Both things. At once. There was not a sentence she could say in that county that separated them. Try it yourself. Go ahead and try it. Stand up at the Ballard schoolhouse in front of 60 people and say, "That frame was mine. I laid it out alone when I was 23, and it did not fall because of anything I cut." The first half of that sentence is the confession they have wanted for 14 months. The second half is an excuse. And nobody on God's earth listens to the second half of a sentence like that. She could hear Merritt Ballard saying it back to her in his mild voice, not even unkindly. "So the frame that fell is the one you did alone." Well, there it is, Alma. There it is. She sat in that grass until the stars came out. Then she got up, and she took her father's race knife out of the roll, and she knelt down at the north end of that plate and put the point of it against the A. And she stayed like that a long while. She did not cut it out. I have thought about that more than any other thing in this story. She had a knife in her hand, and 6 characters under it, and a whole hour of dark, and nobody in the world would ever have known. She could have taken that mark off in 20 minutes and gone back to being a woman with a hypothesis about brace mortises, which is a hard place to stand, but not an impossible one. She put the knife back in the roll. Then she got the lantern, and a stub of pencil, and her book, and she wrote down the only thing she wrote about it that whole summer. The hand is shaky in the original. Her granddaughter has it still. Northeast plate turned. Mark good. Nothing broken in it. And underneath that, on the next line, they will have to see it standing. There is no other way now. She worked 10 days after that. She did not sleep much. The work went on the way work does. She squared 2 new posts out of green fir and hated both of them. She cut 14 mortises in the northeast plate, and every one of them was right. She ate cold beans standing up, and she washed in a bucket, and she wrote in the book at night. But there was a thing in her head, and it would not sit down. Where were the braces? 32 sticks of white oak, 5 feet long, 4 inches by 6, with a tenon cut on each end at 45 degrees. Not one of them in that wreck. She had turned every stick in that field by the 20th of July, and she had 84 sound timbers and 11 loads of firewood and no braces at all. Sticks do not evaporate. So on the 24th of July, she sat down on a trestle in the middle of the afternoon and did a thing she was good at, which is to stop working and think about men. Not about timber. About men. And about what men do at 4 in the afternoon on the last day of a job. She had watched frames come down. She had helped take 2 of them down herself with her father. And she knew the order of it, because there is only one order. You strip the boards. You knock the roof off. You pull the pegs on the plates. You lower them. Then you take the bents apart, and the very first sticks that come out of a bent, the very first before anything else, are the braces. They are short. They are light. 2 men can carry one. And what you do with a brace when you pull it is you throw it. You throw it clear so nobody breaks an ankle on it, and you go on to the heavy work, and the braces end up in a heap 40 feet away in the grass. Then you load. And you load big first, because the big sticks want the good wagons and the fresh teams and the light of the morning. The braces are the last pile. The last pile is the pile that does not go. She sat on that trestle for maybe 20 minutes. Then she got up. She went and hitched the gray horse. She left on the morning of the 28th of July, 1888, 2 days' food, a lantern, a laprobe. She drove 40 miles east to the Tongue River. Alone, she told nobody where she was going. She got to the Halkett place at 4 in the afternoon on the 2nd day. There was nobody there. The bank had it, and the bank had not sold it, and nothing had been done to it in 15 months. The house had a broken window, and the door was standing open, and there was a coyote on the step that got up and went off, without hurrying. There were rails down. There was a well with the rope cut. And there was the barn ground. She had been on it before. She had been on it in the September of 1881. She was 23 years old. Her father was hollering at 90 men, and Wesley was up on a plate in the sun. There had been a barn 90 feet long standing on that spot for 6 years. Now there was a rectangle of packed dirt with weeds coming through it. The stone piers were still set in the ground in 2 rows. She stood in that rectangle for a while. Then she went to the sheds. There were 3 of them along the south fence, open on the north side, the kind of thing a horse outfit throws up out of poles and slabs for wagon gear and harness. The first one had a broken buggy in it. The second had nothing. The third had a stack of oak. They were laid up in 4 courses of 8, square and neat, the way a man stacks something he intends to come back for. 32 of them. She counted them 3 times. She counted them out loud the 3rd time. standing in a fallen down shed 40 miles from anybody. Her hand on each stick as she said the number, and when she got to 32, she had to sit down on the ground. Then she looked at them properly, because counting is not evidence, and she knew it. Every one of them was 5 feet 2 inches long. Every one had a tenon on both ends, cut at 45 degrees, 2 inches thick. Every one had a peg hole bored through the tenon. And here is what she was really looking for, and here is what she found. The peg holes were round. A drawboard peg hole does not stay round. When a joint is drawboard, the hole in the tenon is bored a 1/4 inch off from the hole in the mortise. On purpose. Then you drive the pin through. The pin bends. It drags that joint up tight, and it stays tight for 200 years. And the hole ends up oval. Always, every drawboard hole in the world is oval on the load side, and you can feel it with your finger in the dark. 64 peg holes in that stack, all of them round, all of them clean. Those braces had been cut in 1881. They had been pegged into a barn on this ground and had held it up for 6 winters. Then somebody knocked the pins out and threw them clear. They had lain in this shed since the June of 1887. One side of every stick was silver from the weather. The other side was still the color of new oak. They had never been in the cross-anchor barn at all. Not for 1 day. Not for 1 hour. Ward Ballard had hauled 22 loads 40 miles. He stood up 9 bents. And he had left 32 sticks of white oak lying in a shed on the Tongue River. He did not know he had done it. That is the entire story of the 17th of March. She sat in that shed until the light went orange. Now here is the part where you want her to load them. I want her to load them. Every time I tell this, I want her to load them. 32 sticks in the wagon, 40 miles back, straight into Ballard, right up the middle of that town on a Saturday, and dump them in the road in front of the yard. She took one. One, the end one on the top course, the one with the deepest weather on it. She put it in the wagon under the seat with the lap robe over it. She left the other 31 stacked exactly as they were. She pulled a slab across the front of the shed so the wind would not get at them. Then she drove home 40 miles and got in at 11 at night on the 30th of July. And she did nothing with it. For 4 months, she did nothing with it at all. I need you to understand why, because if you do not understand this, you will not understand her, and this is the exact hinge of the whole thing. She could not use it. Sit with that. She had the answer. She had the 32 sticks and the round peg holes and the weathered sides and a whole shed she could take any man in the county out to see. And she could not use one bit of it. Here is why. Take it one piece at a time, the way she did, on her knees in the grass that night with a lamp. The empty mortises prove nothing, because an empty mortise looks exactly like a mortise whose brace snapped out in a wind. She knew the difference. She could show you the difference in 4 minutes with a knife. But the difference is the absence of a bruise, in a hole, in a stick lying in a field. A man who has already decided will look at that hole and see nothing at all, because there is nothing to see. That is the whole of it. Her proof is a thing that is not there. The 32 sticks in the shed prove nothing, because they are 32 sticks in a shed. Any woman with a shop and 3 weeks could cut 32 sticks and stack them. Any woman with a wagon could haul 32 sticks 40 miles and put them there. And a woman who has been out on a ranch alone all summer with a chisel is a woman who has had 3 months and every tool in Montana. And there is a worse one under that. Say the county believes her. Say every man in Ballard rides out to the Tongue River and looks in that shed and comes back convinced. What have they decided? They have decided that Ward Ballard's crew wrecked Emmett Locke's $1,950 barn through pure carelessness, which means Emmett Locke has been made a fool of in public twice by the same building, and the man who did it is the son of the man who holds half the paper in the county. And it would come out of her mouth, hers, the widow with the shop. And the note, and the reason, and the mark under the northeast plate would come out with it. Because you cannot open that door halfway. The first question any man would ask, the very first, is how does she know so much about what is inside that frame? A.S. 1881. That is the answer. And that answer, in that county, in that year, does not sound like a woman being cleared. It sounds like a woman confessing. So on the night of the 30th of July, 1888, Alma Doak made the decision that this whole story turns on, and she made it alone in a field, and she never took it back. She was not going to prove anything. She was going to build the barn. Emmett Locke rode down on the 2nd of August. She was cutting a tie-beam housing and she stopped, which she never did, and she stood up and put the chisel down on the beam, and he saw that and got off his horse. "You went somewhere," he said. "How do you know that?" Fenn said the fire was cold 2 nights. "I went to the Tongue River," she said. "To the Halkett place. I drove out on the 28th, and I came back on the 30th. What is out there?" "The barn ground," she said, "and 3 sheds." He waited. "Mr. Locke, I am going to tell you the truth, and then I am going to ask you not to ask me the next question. If you ask it, I will answer it, because I will not lie to you. But I would rather you did not ask it until this barn is standing. Say it. Your braces never left that place," she said. "They are stacked in a shed on the south fence, 32 of them, and I counted them 3 times, and they have never been in a building on the Rosebud. Not for an hour. That is what took your barn down, not the frame, the 32 sticks that never got on the wagon." He stood there in the cut grass for a while. "Ward Ballard," he said. "He did not know. He did not know." "No," she said. "That is not a thing I am saying to be generous. A brace mortise with nothing in it is a hole. He builds with nails. To him it is a hole. He sheeted those walls with 1-inch boards. The boards made it feel stiff as a church for 8 months. Every man who walked into that barn would have told you it was the soundest building in the county. They would have been wrong. So was he. You could ruin him with that. Yes, you are not going to." "No. Why?" And this is where she said it. She said it looking straight at him, with her hands hanging down, in the middle of a mowed field on the 2nd of August. She never once pretended afterward that she had not meant it. "Because I am glad your barn fell down." He did not move. "I have been asking myself for 2 weeks whether I would put it back up the way it was, if I could reach out and do it," she said. "The 17th of March, undone, your $1,850 hole, your hay saved, and me at the crossing making coffins. And I would let it fall," she said. "Every time. That is the kind of woman you have hired, Mr. Locke. Your barn coming down is the best thing that has happened to me in 2 years. I have known it since the 27th of April. I have not been able to get it out of me, and I am not going to stand in this field and pretend to be better than I am." The wind went over the grass. "All right," he said. "That is all you have got to say?" she asked. "You wanted me to argue you out of it," he said. "I am not going to. You are not wrong, and I am not going to help you feel better about it." He picked up his reins. "I will tell you the part you have not thought of, though. What? I am glad it fell down too," he said, and he got on his horse and rode home. August was the cutting, everything before it was sorting. Thinking, lying awake. August was 31 days of a chisel and a mallet, and a woman on her knees on a plank. Let me tell you what one joint costs. A mortise in an 8-inch post is a hole 5 inches deep, 1.5 inches wide, 5 inches long. It has to be flat on the bottom. It has to be square on the cheeks, and it has to be dead in line with a hole 28 feet away on the same stick. You bore it out first with an auger. 4 holes, overlapping, cranked by hand. And green fir takes the auger like a wet rope, and you lean on it with your whole weight and your whole chest. Then you take the waist out with a chisel and a mallet. Then you pare the cheeks. Then you get your eye down at floor level and sight along it, and you find the little swell in the middle that you cannot feel with your fingers and can see in a raking light, and you take that out too. 20 minutes if the wood is kind, 40 if it is not. There were 148 mortises in that frame. She cut 106 of them in the August of 1888. She cut 28 braces and 28 tenons to go in them. She bored and drawbored 214 peg holes. And she split and shaved 260 oak pins out of straight grain stock with a froe and a draw knife, sitting on a shaving horse in the shade of the wagon in the middle of the afternoon. Her hands split open in the first week and healed hard in the third. She was up at 4. She quit at dark. She lost weight that month, which she did not have to lose and did not want to. And by the last week of August, she was so tired at night that twice she woke up in the morning still holding the pencil. Fen Shivers came 3 evenings a week. She let him bore. That was all. Boring is honest work. It cannot go wrong. Cutting can. On the 20th of August, she was 9 days behind. On the 24th of August, she sat down with the book and the stub of pencil and did the arithmetic she had been not doing since July. Here it was. She had taken in $19 and $19 and $19 all summer and spent all of it on oak, and she had $31 in the world. Emmett Locke owed her $625, and half of that, $312, came due on the day the barn stood, which by any honest reckoning was going to be the first week of September. And the note was $285, and it came due on the 1st of September. 5 days. The whole thing turned on 5 days. She rode into Ballard on the 27th of August and stood at that counter and asked Merritt Ballard for 3 weeks. I cannot, he said. 12 days. Alma, the barn stands on the 6th, she said. I will have $312 in my hand on the 6th of September from a man good for it, and I will walk it into this yard the same afternoon. And if it does not stand on the 6th, he asked, it will stand on the 6th. You have been out there 4 months, he said. You have not been in a church or a store or a kitchen since the 3rd of May. Do you know what they are saying? I have a fair idea. They are saying you have lost your mind out there, he said. And I do not say it. But I told you in July that I would hold it to the 1st, and I told you in front of a witness. If I move it for you now, then every man in this county I have not moved it for has a grievance with me. And I have got 40 years in this town. So, the answer is no. The answer is no, he said, and I would give a good deal for it to be different. She thanked him. She actually thanked him, in front of the yard hands. Then she went out and untied the horse and rode 9 miles home and sat in her father's shop until 2 in the morning. On the 28th, she rode out to the cross anchor and told Emmett Locke exactly where she stood, because she had made herself a rule in May that she would tell that man the truth about money, whatever it cost her. He heard it out. Then he said the third one. I will pay it Thursday, he said, not as an advance and not out of the contract, as a plain thing between 2 people. And Mrs. Doak, before you say what you are going to say, I want you to hear that I know what you are going to say. And I am asking anyway. Then you know the answer. Say it out loud, he said, so I can quit thinking about it. On the day that barn stands, she said, I want 3 things in this world to be true. that every stick in it was cut by me, that every dollar of it was earned, and that no man on this earth can say he carried me. If you pay that note on Thursday, Mr. Locke, the third one is gone forever. And it will be gone in the year 1930 when I am dead, and somebody will still be able to say it. That is a hard way to live. It is the only way I know how," she said. So on the 30th of August, she did the thing that cost her more than any hour of that whole summer, and she did it in cold blood, and she never once complained about it after. She sold her father's timber. In the loft over the shop at Cottonwood Creek there was seasoned stock. 50 years of it, in a way. There was white oak he had bought green in 1874, stickered and turned and left alone for 14 years. There was clear fir 26 feet long without a knot in it. There was a bundle of ash he was keeping for wagon tongues. And there were 9 pieces of black walnut a man had traded him for a coffin in 1879. It was not lumber. It was the only capital that shop had ever had. You cannot buy 14 years seasoned oak. You can only wait 14 years. She sold every stick of it to Ward Ballard. She rode in on the 30th and found him at his own building yard and told him what was in that loft. He came out the next morning. He climbed the ladder and went through it with a lantern for an hour. When he came down, he was trying very hard not to look pleased. He offered $250. $300, she said. $260, $290, and you haul it. $290 and I haul it, he said. Mrs. Doak, I will tell you honest, that is a lot of money for old sticks, and I am paying it because I know what it is. There is not another loft like that between here and Bismarck. I know exactly what it is, Mr. Ballard, she said. You are all right about this? No, she said. Put your money on the bench, please. He counted out $290. He hauled the loft away on the 31st in 3 loads, and he used most of that oak over the next 6 years for nailed studding and header stock in buildings that had no joints in them anywhere. She stood in her own yard and watched the last load go out the gate. That is the only time in this entire story that anybody ever saw her cry. The only person who saw it was a 22-year-old hand who had come by on his own time to see if she needed anything. Fen Shivers never told a living soul until he was 71 years old. On the 1st of September, 1888, she walked into the Ballard yard and paid $285 in coin and paper on the counter. Merritt Ballard looked at it for a moment. He knew where it came from. His own son had told him at supper. He put both hands flat on the counter. Alma, he said, take it back. No, sir, I will tear the note up, he said. Right here. I should have done it in July, and I have thought about nothing else for 6 weeks. Mr. Ballard, take the money back. If you tear that note up, she said, then in 20 years, when men talk about this, the sentence will be that Merritt Ballard let her off. And I would rather owe you the $285 for the rest of my life than have that sentence exist. She pushed the coin across. Write me my receipt, please. And write on it that it was paid in full and paid on time. He wrote it. His hand was not steady. He wrote paid in full, 1 Sept 1888, and he wrote her name, and under her name, without being asked, he wrote Framer. That was the 4th one. That is all of them. The raising was the 6th of September, 1888. Emmett Locke sent word out 3 weeks before, the way you do, to every outfit within 30 miles. Beef at noon. A barrel. Bring a pike pole if you have got one. 90 men came. They came because a raising is a raising, and it is the closest thing to a holiday that country had. And they came because in the whole of Custer County there was not one man who was going to miss this, and they all knew it, and most of them were honest enough about it by then to admit what they had come to see. They had come to watch it not work. They got there at 7 in the morning, and the sun came up on the mowed floor, and 84 old sticks and 21 new ones laid out in 7 bents, flat on the ground. Numbered, pinned loose, in order, ready, men walked up and down that layout for half an hour without saying much. Some of them knew enough to see it. A raising crew is not all cowhands. There were 3 or 4 old men there who had raised barns in Ohio and Vermont before the war. One of them was a Norwegian named Sverre Halvorsen. He was 66. He had framed in the old country. He walked the whole 70 feet twice. Then he stood at the northeast corner with his hat in his hand and said something in Norwegian that nobody understood. Then he found her and said, in English, "Who cut this?" "I did. All of it. All of it." He looked at her for a while. "Then I will hold a rope," he said. At 7:30, Emmett Locke got up on a wagon bed in front of 90 men. He was not a speechmaker. Everybody there knew that. He had his hat in his hand, and he waited until it went quiet, and it took a while, and he waited it out. "This is Mrs. Doak's raising," he said. "She calls it." 3 words. That is the sentence the county carried out of that field, and men were still saying it 30 years later, and most of them shortened it to those 3. "She calls it. Every man here works for her today," he said. "If she says a thing, that is the thing. If any man cannot do that, there is no hard feeling in it, and I mean that, but he can eat at noon and go home, and he is not putting his hands on my building." Nobody left. 2 men thought about it. Everybody could see which 2. Neither one of them moved. Then Culraney walked over to the number 1 bent. 44 years old, foreman of the cross anchor, the man who had ordered her off that ground on the 27th of April in front of 4 riders. He picked up the butt end of a pike pole. He said it loud, to nobody in particular. "Where do you want me, ma'am?" She was standing on the sill with her father's book in her apron pocket. "North end of the first bent," she said. "You and Halvorsen on the plate. Mr. Shivers takes the pins." And that was the raising. Here is how a barn goes up, and it is the same now as it was in 1650, and 90 men can do it in a day, and 4 men cannot do it in a month. The bents are lying flat on the sills, with the foot of every post right at its own mortise. You put men on pike poles down the length of it, and men on the ropes, and 20 men with their hands under the top of the bent. And you lift. You lift the whole 40-foot triangle up off the ground by main strength until it is high enough for the poles to bite. Then the poles walk it up, and the foot of every post drops into its own hole in the sill, and 40 feet of oak and fir stands in the air, with 15 men holding it steady on ropes, while somebody hammers a temporary brace on. Then you do it again 6 more times. Then you drop the plates on. That is the fine work. 2 40-foot sticks going up 28 feet in the air on ropes. 14 tenons on the tops of 14 posts. Every one of those tenons has to find its own mortise in the plate at the same time. And if the layout is a half-inch out anywhere, it will not go. The first bent went up at 9 minutes past 8. It went up clean. The second went up at 20 minutes to 9. The third at 9. The fourth one nearly killed 3 men. They had it about 3/4 up when the pike men on the west side got ahead of the men on the east. That happens. It is the most common way a man gets hurt at a raising. The bent came up past Plum and started to go over to the north, and there were 15 men on 4 ropes on the far side holding it, and every instinct that any one of them had was to haul. If they had hauled, it would have come back over the top of them. She was standing on the sill at the northeast corner, and she saw it go, and she did not shout hold. "Slack it," she shouted, "all 4 ropes. Slack it now." They slacked it. The bent went over another 8 inches. Then it stopped. The temporary brace on the number 3 bent took it, exactly the way it was put there to. It hung and swayed and came back. The pikemen got under it. They walked it up Plum. It dropped into the sill with a sound like a door closing. Nobody said anything for a second. Then Rainey said, "Well, I would have hauled." "I know you would have," she said. "That is why I am on the sill." And 90 men laughed, and it was not a mean laugh. And it went through that field like water going into dry ground, and after that the day belonged to her. Here is what the day sounded like. I want you to have it, because 90 men remembered it, and not one of them ever described it the same way twice. It sounded like a woman's voice, all day, over the top of everything. Number 5. Footmen first. Get that foot in the mortise before you lift. Before, not after. Halvorsen, ma'am. Take the east rope. Give the west to Pratt. Ma'am. Pikemen, look at me, all of you. When I say walk, you walk. You do not run. A raising has never once been won by running. Yes, ma'am. Ready, walk it. That was the whole vocabulary. 9 or 10 sentences, over and over, from 8 in the morning until dark. She did not shout much. She did not have to. There is a way of pitching a voice over 90 men that has nothing to do with volume, and her father had it, and Wesley had it, and she had been listening to it since she was 6 years old. Twice that morning she stopped everything. The first time, a young hand had his boot inside the line of a falling bent. Stop. 90 men stopped. You, 2 steps back. Now 2 more. She waited until he moved. If that bent gets away from us, that is where it lands. Anybody standing where I do not want you standing gets asked 1 time. The second time was the number 6 sill, which had rolled a ½ inch on the pier overnight. Stop. What is it? It has moved. It is a ½ inch. It is a ½ inch at the bottom, she said. It is 4 inches at the plate. Bar it back and shim it, and I want a man on the level while you do it. It took 25 minutes. Nobody complained. That is the thing about a crew. A crew will forgive you almost anything except being wrong, and by 10 in the morning that field had worked out that she was not wrong. The plates went on at 20 minutes past 11. Both of them. 14 tenons into 14 mortises, up 28 feet, on ropes, with 6 men on ladders guiding. It took 40 minutes. And when the northeast plate came down onto the corner post, the joint closed so tight that Halvorsen put his hand flat on it, up on the ladder, and turned around and yelled down at 90 people. There is no gap. There is no gap in it. They ate at noon. Beef and beans and 3 kinds of pie the cross-anchor cook had been up since 3 making. The women set it out on planks laid over sawhorses. There were 30 of them out there, wives and daughters off 9 outfits, and they had been at it since 5 in the morning. Iva Ballard was one of them. She did not speak to Alma. Alma did not speak to her. But when the men had been through the line, Iva Ballard carried a plate down the length of that frame and found her sitting on a sill with her book and set it beside her and stood there a second. You have not eaten since when? I ate. When? Yesterday, I expect. Eat that, Iva Ballard said, and walked back up. That is the whole of it. That is every word the 2 of them said that day. There was one other thing at noon. A man from Sunday Creek, a big loud one, had been at the barrel since 10. He was telling a knot of hands that a woman had told him where to stand 3 times already. He had a good mind to say something about it. Rainey walked over. Say it then, he said. Say what? Say the thing you have been going to say all morning, Rainey said. Go on. Say it out loud where she can hear it, and then get your horse. The man did not say it. That is what I thought, Rainey said. Now go and hold a rope. And in the afternoon they put the braces in. 28 of them. White oak, 5 feet 2 inches, cut by her hand, out of stock. She had bought $19 at a time, across a counter in front of men who would not sell her on the book. And this is the part I have been waiting to tell you. Every brace in that barn was drawboard. She had bored the hole in every tenon a quarter of an inch off from the hole in the mortise, on purpose, so that the pin would have to bend to go through. That is the whole trick of a hand-framed building, and it is 400 years old, and Ward Ballard had never heard of it. You set the brace in loose. It stands proud. It does not fit. It looks wrong, and every man watching who does not know will tell you it is wrong. Then you drive a tapered oak pin into it with a mallet, and the pin bends around that quarter inch, and it drags the tenon home, and the whole joint sucks itself shut and stands up tight, and it will stay tight in 1988, because the harder that joint is pushed, the harder the pin pulls. She drove the first one herself. She stood on a ladder and hit an oak pin 4 times with a 3-pound mallet, and 90 men watched a joint close up in front of them. And Sverre Halvorsen said the thing in Norwegian again. Then she handed the mallet to Fenn Shivers, and taught him. He taught 2 more. By 5 in the afternoon, there were 28 braces drawboard into that frame. The whole building had gone from a thing standing there to a thing that would not move. You could feel it. That is not a figure of speech either. A braced frame and an unbraced frame feel different underfoot. There were men up on those plates at 5 o'clock who had been up on the old barn a year before. 2 of them came down and did not know how to say what they wanted to say. The last pin went in at 20 minutes to 6. By custom the framer drives it, and by custom the framer's name goes on the tie beam, cut in with a race knife, with the date. She drove the pin. 90 men took their hats off, which is also the custom, and which nobody had told them to do. Then Emmett Locke came up with a knife in his hand and asked her where she wanted it cut. "Nowhere," she said. "Mrs. Doak, not this year," she said. "If my name goes on that beam tonight, then this is a story about a woman getting her name on a beam. Let it be a story about a barn. Ask me again after a winter." He put the knife in his pocket. There was one more thing she did that evening, and only 4 people saw it, and it is the reason we know what happened on the 20th of November. She took a plumb bob out of her apron, a brass one, her father's, with a linen line on it. She climbed up and tied that line to the underside of the northeast tie beam, 28 feet up, and let it down until the point of it hung 2 inches off the stone. Then she got down on her hands and knees on the sillstone with a nail and scratched a cross in the stone right under the point. "What is that for?" Culraney said. "That is the building telling you the truth," she said. "A frame does not fall over all at once. It leans first. It leans a quarter inch, and then a half, and then 2 inches, over a year, and nobody sees it, because nobody looks at a barn from the outside with a straightedge." She stood up and dusted her knees. "That string is over that mark tonight. Come in here after every big blow, Mr. Rainey, and look at it. If it is ever off that mark by so much as your thumb, you get every man and every horse out of this building, and you send for me. And if it is on the mark, then it is on the mark," she said, "and you have got nothing to think about, and you can go and have your supper." The barn was roofed by the 22nd of September. She stayed out there another 3 weeks. She did the finish. She hung the big doors. She built the hay track, the ladder, the grain bins. She cut and fitted the lean-to on the south side and tied it into the main frame properly, which is a thing Ward Ballard's men had not done either. Emmett Locke paid her the second $312 on the 14th of October. $625 in 2 payments for 5 months of work. Take out the $19 and the $19 and the $19 all summer, and she cleared something under $400 on the biggest job of her life. She has said it was the best money she was ever paid. Now, here is what the county did about it. Nothing. I want to be honest with you, because this is the part that gets tidied up when people tell it. And it should not be. The barn stood. 90 men had been there. And Custer County did not change its mind. There is no such thing as a county changing its mind in a week. What happened was quieter and stranger. Men rode out. All that autumn, men rode out to the Rosebud and looked at that barn and did not say much, and rode home and did not say much there either. Some of them walked around inside it. A few of them got up on the mow and jumped, which is a thing men do in a new barn without knowing why they are doing it. Nobody said she was right. Nobody said the words. But in the last week of October, a man named Enos Pratt drove 14 miles to the shop at Cottonwood Creek and asked her, with his hat in his hands, whether she would come and look at his horse barn. "Look at it how? Tell me if it will stand," he said. "I do not know how to ask it any better than that." She went. It took her half a day. She got under it with a lantern. She got up in the mow. She put a straightedge on 2 posts. Then she came down. She told him the truth. His barn was sound. His roof was not. The 2 collared ties over the middle bay had pulled, and he had a year, maybe 2. He gave her $3. Then a man on Sunday Creek. Then a man at the crossing with a store building. Then the Lutheran church at Rosebud, which had a 40-foot span and a crack in a wall plate nobody had been able to explain. Between the 20th of October and the 18th of November, she looked at 11 buildings and took in $60. $60 is not a living. $60, that autumn, was something better than a living. Because not one of those 11 men asked her to build anything. Every one of them asked her to tell them the truth about a building. And there is only one reason on God's earth you ask a person that. You ask because you think they know. The county had not said it out loud yet, but it had started to act like it, which comes first. Now let me tell you about Emmett Locke and the lantern, because she did not learn this for 2 years, and she learned it from Cull Rainey and not from him. On a night in the middle of October, after the second payment and after she had gone home to the crossing, Emmett Locke went out to his own barn at 9 at night with a lantern and a stool. He knew where to look. He had been standing 6 feet away on the 17th of July when a 22-year-old hand asked a woman why she had gone white, and he had thought about it every week since. He set the stool at the northeast corner. He got up on it. He put the lantern up under the plate. He turned his head sideways. A S-1881. He looked at it a long time. Then he did a thing that tells you everything about him. He did not ride 22 miles and knock on her door and ask her about it. He went to church. On the following Sunday, he drove into Ballard and sat through the whole Methodist service in a back pew. He waited. When the building was empty and the minister had gone home to his dinner, he took a candle end out of his pocket. Then he got down on his knees in the corner behind the last pew, under the northeast plate of a church that Jotham Stannard framed in 1873. JS 1873, same hand, same 2 letters and 4 numbers, same place on the same corner. He sat down on the floor of that church with the candle burning on the boards beside him. Because he understood it now, all the way through. He had 90 feet of proof in his own yard, and he could not use it either. He could not say a word of it. Say Emmett Locke stood up in Ballard. Say he said the widow laid out the Halkett frame alone at 23 years of age, and that he had seen her mark on it. Every man in that county would hear one sentence, and one only. So it was hers. He had been sitting on it since the middle of October. He was still sitting on it on the 20th of November. There was one evening in that October. It belongs here. She had come out to hang the last of the big doors, and she stayed and ate at the house, which she had not done once all summer. Afterward, the 2 of them walked out to the barn in the dark with a lantern, because he wanted to show her that the hay track ran sweet. It ran sweet. They stood in the middle of 70 feet of building with the lantern down on the floor between them. "Can I ask you a thing?" he said. "You can ask. Wesley Doak." "What about him?" "The county says he built these," he said. "I've got a barn over my head that you cut every joint of, so I know better. But I have been trying since July to work out whether that is a thing you hate him for." She was quiet a while. When she answered it, it was the only time in her whole life she said it out loud to anybody. "I loved him," she said. "I did not ask you that." "You did, though." She put her hand flat on a post. "You want to know if I spent 5 years angry. I did not." He was the only man alive who knew exactly what I was, and he said so at his own table with his mouth full about once a month. And he never took one bit of it for himself in that house. Not once. What he took out there. In front of men. That is a hard trade. It was not a trade, she said. It was a marriage. There is a difference? There is all the difference there is, she said. I let him take it. I wanted the work more than I wanted the name, and I knew what I was doing every single time. And I would do it again, and that is the part I cannot get comfortable with, and I have quit trying. He did not say anything. He told me one thing the Sunday before he died, she said. He said he ought to have told somebody. He was 38 years old, and he was going, and what he had on his mind at the end was that. "So you are not angry at him?" "No. Who are you angry at then?" "Everybody who is still here," she said. "Which is a poor way to live, and I know it." She picked the lantern up off the floor. "Are you going to shut that door," she said, "or am I?" He shut the door. The blow came in on the evening of the 20th of November, 1888. It came out of the northwest, the way the March one had, and it was worse. Old men in that country compared the two of them for 30 years afterward, and there was never any argument about which was worse. It started about 5 in the afternoon with the temperature falling. By 8 it was taking shingles. By 10 it was solid, the kind of wind that is not gusts anymore but one long push, and it had snow in it, wet snow first and then dry. And it did not let up until nearly 4 in the morning. She was at the crossing that night, alone, in the house, with the shop shut and the gray horse in the shed. She did not sleep. Nobody in that county slept. She sat up in her father's chair with the lamp turned low and the wind coming at the west wall of that house in one long push that did not stop. Not gusts. A push. You can hear the difference. Everybody out there could. At 9 she went out and put a second rope on the shed door. At 10 she came back in. At 11:30 something went over out by the creek, and she never did find out what it was. And she sat there and she did the only thing she was able to do, which was arithmetic. 28 braces, 7 bents, 4 to a bent, every one drawboard 1/4 inch, sills bedded on stone, the stone set below frost. She went through that building in her head, joint by joint, all night, the way you go through a room you have lost something in. The corner posts, the tie beams, the purlin plates, the rafter feet, and the way she had housed them. The 2 new posts she had hated in July, and had cut again in August, because she hated them. There was one joint she was not sure of. There is always one. Any framer will tell you the same. Somewhere in every building there is one joint you would go back and do again, and you know exactly which one it is, and you will know it for the rest of your life. Hers was the number 3 tie beam at the west end. She had housed it a 16th shy on the south cheek on the 19th of August, at about 4 in the afternoon, when her hands were done and she should have quit an hour before. A 16th of an inch. She sat in that chair from midnight to 4 in the morning, thinking about a 16th of an inch, 22 miles away, in the dark, in the worst wind since 1868. That is what it is to build something. Nobody tells you that part. The wind quit a little before 5. The sun came up on a county that had been rearranged. Here is the list. The county wrote it down, because the county always writes it down. The new hall at Ballard came down at about 1:30 in the morning. It was 6 weeks old. It was 60 feet by 30 with a clear span. Built out of new mill stock and wire nails by Ward Ballard's crew for $1,090, and it went over to the southeast in one piece, and the whole east wall came off it like a lid. The Stockmen's Association was to have met in it on the 24th. The freight shed at the Ballard siding lost its roof entire. 2 of Ward Ballard's barns went down. Coils, on Sunday Creek, the one that went up in 9 days in the March of 1887, folded flat with 40 tons of hay in it. And a machine shed on the tongue. 3 miles of new fence on the Rosebud went over. The depot roof at Miles City lifted at the north end and came back down 4 feet out of place, and a loaded wagon standing on the platform was moved 40 feet. Merritt Ballard's own drying shed, behind the yard, with $600 of stock in it, was 6 inches deep in snow by morning, because the north wall was in the alley. And out on the Rosebud, at about 4 in the morning, with the wind still going, Cull Rainey put on his coat and took a lantern and walked 400 yards from the house to the barn, and let himself in the little door on the south side. He had done it after every blow since September. He had never told her he was doing it, and he had never told Locke either, and by his own account, he felt like a fool every single time. He stood inside a building he could not hear himself think in, and held the lantern up. The plumb line hung straight down out of the dark, 28 feet, and it did not move. The point of the brass bob was hanging over the middle of the cross, scratched in the sillstone. He got down on his knees on that stone with the lantern and put his eye right down at it, because he wanted to be certain, and he said afterward that he could not get a thumbnail between the point and the center of that mark. Then Cull Rainey, who was 44 years old and from Kentucky, and not a man given to any kind of display, sat down on the sill of that barn in the middle of a November gale and laughed until he had to wipe his face. The meeting was the 24th of November. It could not be at the hall. The hall was in the road. So the Stockmen's Association of Custer County met in the Ballard Schoolhouse, which held about 70 comfortably and had about 100 in it that night, with men standing 3 deep at the back and the windows fogged over and everybody's coat steaming. She was there. She did not want to be there. Enos Pratt had asked her to come and look at a barn on the Sunday. Then he had said the rest of it, careful as a man crossing ice. There might be some talk at the meeting about the buildings. A person who knew about buildings might want to be in the room. She sat in the 3rd row, the same row. The first hour was hall business. It was ugly. There was $190 of subscription money lying in a heap, and men wanted to know about it. Ward Ballard stood up and defended himself, and he did not do it badly, and here is what he said, and I want you to hear it, because he believed every word. It was an act of God, he said. It was the worst wind in 20 years. There is not a building in this county that would have stood in that. Not one. Anybody who tells you different is selling something. And a voice from the back of that room, an old Norwegian voice, said, "One stood." The room went quiet. The cross-anchor barn stood, Sverre Halvorsen said. I helped raise it. I was in it Wednesday. It never moved. That is a lucky building in a sheltered draw, Ward Ballard said. It is on the flat, said Cull Rainey, from the wall. It is on the flattest ground on the Rosebud, and it took that wind broadside for 11 hours. And it might have ended there, in a shouting match about draws and luck, the way these things do. Except that Emmett Locke stood up. He had been sitting at the end of the 2nd row, with something long wrapped in a wagon sheet across his knees, and nobody had asked him about it, because men bring odd things to meetings. He carried it up to the front and laid it on the table in front of the chairman. Then he unrolled the sheet. It was a stick of white oak, 5 feet 2 inches long, 4 inches by 6, with a tenon cut on both ends at 45 degrees, and a peg hole bored through each tenon. One face of it was silver gray from 17 months of weather. The other 3 faces were the color of new oak. 100 men looked at a piece of wood. "This is a brace," Emmett Locke said. "There are supposed to be 32 of them in my barn. There were none, not one. It fell down in March because it did not have any in it, and it did not have any in it because they were never on the wagon." Ward Ballard said, "Where did you get that?" "Out of the 3rd shed on the south fence at the Halkett place on the Tongue River," Locke said. "I drove out and got it on the 8th of November. There are 31 more lying exactly where they were on the day your crew left them, stacked in 4 courses of 8. I did not move one of them, and I did not touch the stack. Any man in this room can ride out there tomorrow and count them." Nobody said anything. And before somebody says the obvious thing, Locke said, "I want it in the minutes that I went out there myself, alone, in my own wagon, and that Mrs. Doak did not go with me, and did not know I was going. She has known about that shed since the end of July." He turned around. He looked at the room. "Since July," he said, 4 months. She has been in this county the whole time with 3 wagon loads of proof sitting in a shed 40 miles away. She never said one word about it to anybody but me. And she asked me not to ask her about it until the barn was up. She would not use it. I have thought about why for 3 months, and I have got 2 answers, and I do not like either one of them. Here is the first. She knew that if it came from her, this room would call it an excuse." He let that sit. "Here is the second," he said. "She was right." Ward Ballard sat down. He sat down slowly in the middle of the aisle, on the end of a bench that was not his. He put his hands on his knees. He stared at that piece of oak on the table. He did not say another word for the rest of the night. In the January he went out to the Tongue River himself and counted them. And then Merritt Ballard stood up. He was 58 years old. He had put the first store on that ground in 1871. He had said 4 words in his own yard in the March of 1887 in front of 9 men. And he had never once in 20 months thought about them again until that autumn, and now he had thought about very little else. He did not apologize, not that night. That would have been easy. This county did not do easy. He turned around in the middle of that packed schoolhouse, and he found her in the 3rd row, and he said, "Mrs. Doak, in the April we would not open your bid on that hall." "No, sir." "Do you still have it?" And every head in that room came around. She sat still for a second. Then she reached into her apron pocket, and she took out a folded paper with a wax seal on it, gone gray and cracked at the edges, that had been in that pocket or in a drawer at Cottonwood Creek every day for 7 months. She got up. She walked to the front and handed it to him. "Open it yourself," she said. "I have not." Merritt Ballard broke the seal with his thumb in front of 100 people. There were 4 sheets. The first was the price, and the price was $180, which was $90 more than his own son's, and there was a little noise in that room when he read it out, and she stood there and let them make it. Then he turned to the second sheet. The second, third, and fourth sheets were the specification, written out in a clear hand, in pencil, the way she had written everything for 14 years. He read it silently for a moment. Then he stopped. He took his glasses off. He put them back on. And he read one line of it out loud, in a voice that was not entirely steady, to a room of 100 men in wet coats on the 24th of November, 1888. "Bracing," he read, "4 braces to every bent, white oak, 5 feet, tenoned and drawboard, no exceptions, no substitution of iron, no substitution of sheeting. Any building of this span without them will not carry a northwest wind, and I will not put my name to one." He looked up. "That is dated the 9th of April, he said. "That is 7 months before that haul went into the road." Then he folded it back up, all 4 sheets, and he held it out to her. She did not take it. "Keep it," she said. "I know what is in it." And then a woman stood up at the back of that room. Iva Ballard had been on her feet since the seal was broken. She was 55 years old, and she had not spoken in a stockman's meeting in her life, because women did not, and the room turned around and looked at her. "Read the date again," she said. "Iva, read the date on it again." "Merritt," he read it again. "The 9th of April, 1888. That is the night we handed it back to her folded," Iva Ballard said. "I was in this room. I was sitting where Enos Pratt is sitting, and every one of us watched it go back across that table. Not one of us said a word. I have had it in the house with me ever since, and I would like it said out loud in front of everybody, so that we do not get to be quiet about it twice." She sat down. Nobody clapped. That is not what that country did. But 100 men in wet coats sat in a schoolhouse and looked at the floor at the same time. Alma Doak stood at the front of it, with her hands at her sides. That was the closest thing to an apology Custer County ever produced. Now let me finish this properly, because the good part is not the schoolhouse. She did not get rich. This is 1888 and eastern Montana, and a woman with a shop, and there is no version of this where she gets rich. What she got was work. She framed 4 buildings in 1889 and 7 in 1890, and after that she quit counting. She never had a crew of more than 3, and she trained every one of them. One of them was Fen Shivers. He framed barns in that county until 1931. He cut a EE with 4 strokes his whole life, because that is how she showed him. The county never stopped saying a woman's frame. That is true. I am not going to soften it. It stayed in the language out there for 30 years, but it turned over in the mouth sometime around 1890, the way words do. And by the time the old men were telling it to boys who had not been born in 1888, a woman's frame did not mean a thing that would not hold. It meant a thing you could not knock down. Merritt Ballard carried her account on the book from the 25th of November, 1888, until the day he died in 1901, and he never once wrote her name in the ledger without framer after it. In the spring of 1889, she painted a new board for the front of the shop. It says Stannard A.N.D. Doak. Framers. She kept both names on purpose. Her reason, when anybody asked, was always the same. Her father's shop had 2 names on it from 1879, and everybody in Montana had spent 10 years reading only the first one. She was not going to be the one who took a second name off anything. And on a Sunday in the May of 1889, Emmett Locke drove down to Cottonwood Creek with a race knife in his coat pocket. "I have asked you after a winter," he said. "So you have. Where do you want it?" "Northeast tie beam," she said. "Underside, where nobody looks." He would not have that. They argued about it in a yard for 20 minutes, which is the longest either one of them had ever argued about anything. And then they drove 22 miles, and he got up on a ladder and cut it himself. He cut it into the face of the 40-foot tie beam over the main bay, where a man standing in the doorway looks straight at it. He made a poor job of it. He was a cattleman, and he had never held a race knife in his life, and the A wanders and the D is too deep, and the 8 has a hook on it. A. Doak, framer, 1888. She never touched it up. Her granddaughter said she would not let anybody near it with a chisel. Men came out to look at that barn for 40 years. She used to stand under those letters. She told them the same thing. A badly cut letter is the only kind you can be sure nobody was paid to make. He asked her that day, standing in the doorway of that barn. Not for anything. He asked her whether she would think about it. She said she would think about it. She thought about it until the September. Then she said yes. They were married at the crossing by a preacher who had to be sent for from Miles City. She kept her own shop and her own board and her own book of numbers until 1919. Here is the whole of it. For 20 months, a county had a word for anything that looked sound and would not hold, and the word was her. It had 90 feet of evidence lying in the grass to prove it, and every reasonable man in Montana on its side. Then the wind came back on the 20th of November, 1888, and went through that country for 11 hours. In the morning, the Hall was in the road. Coyle's barn was flat. The depot roof was 4 feet out of place, and the only big building left standing between the Rosebud and the Tongue was the one with a woman's mark cut under the northeast plate. It never needed a speech. It needed 84 old sticks, 28 oak braces, 4 months of a woman working alone in a field with her back to the road, and a piece of string hanging over a scratch in a stone. They called her work a woman's frame. It is standing yet.